in September also going to start training to be a cognitive behavioural therapist. So I have a passion for mental health as well as sport. Bit of a different approach to most sports psychologists focus simply on performance. I focus on well-being, and I think that's very, very important when working with athletes. And if they've got good understanding of their mental health and they're able to manage different stresses and different pressure, then they're going to be feeling better and hopefully they're going to perform better. But like I said, there are some sports psychs who will say, we don't focus on that at all, we just focus on performance. So today's workshop is all about implementing sports psychology within schools. I work predominantly within different schools, so yes, at Wellington College and Stowe Rugby, all bring about different opportunities, and it's really interesting to see how each school, I guess, breeds different students in some ways, in terms of their engagement, how they are as people, their personalities, and I think that comes down to the teachers, what you're trying to get across in the messages. And my aim really is to help those elite sports scholars, and in the future hopefully it'll be also to work a bit more within sort of mental health and well-being. In terms of what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to give some brief information about working in sports psychology, and I'll explain that in a bit more depth in the next few minutes. I'm going to talk a bit about transitions, so the different transitions that athletes and students go through and the challenges that you face. Then going to go on and speak about coaching philosophy, or the philosophy of culture as a school. I'm going to talk about my model, so my approach and how I work with athletes and what I do when I work within schools. Then the final 2 points are more applied things in terms of understanding things such as growth fixed mindset, and then how to build sort of an effective relationship if you are working in a team environment, or if you are working with students. What I wanted to start with is I want to educate, I haven't done a workshop with any of you guys yet, or teachers. I want to educate teachers about what the training route is to get into sports psychology. Now, why I do this is because there are a huge amount of people who are working in my field who have absolutely no qualifications. They could be a nutritionist who's also a strength and conditioning coach who's done a 6-week course in whatever, and then think that they can go and run mindset workshops. It drives me absolutely nuts because they're not qualified. And there are 2 routes to doing it. You can either go through the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science, where you do an undergraduate, which is accredited through BASIS, then a master's, and then you do 2 to 3 as a supervision, and then you can call yourself an accredited sports scientist with specialism in psychology. So that's one of the routes. You then have the more official route, which is through the British Psychological Society, which is what I'm doing. Again, exactly the same, an undergraduate and master's, and I'm now completing my supervision, and then I can call myself a sports and exercise psychologist. The reason why I think it's important to tell you guys this is I follow strict ethical guidelines. I have to follow those. I have people overlooking what I do. I have a huge work that I have to submit, and like I said, I think that's very important when working with people. You wouldn't go see if you had a mental health problem, you wouldn't go see someone who wasn't properly qualified. You see a clinical psychologist or someone with the right qualifications. So I like to let everyone know, because if you do go and do sports psychology, want to find out more, make sure that they have these qualifications. It's important. In terms of what I do within the schools and why I guess schools and teachers enjoy sports psychology or like to apply it is transferable. There are a lot of sports psychologists who are now going into business and doing performance psychology, which is very, very big, and they're working with teachers, they're working with people within big businesses, how to become better leaders. And that is exactly the same with students. If I'm teaching students how to manage stress or how to manage pressure within a game, there is no reason why they can't transfer that to exams, and how they can manage pressure more effectively in different exams, and understanding those different things. You've got things such as relaxation skills. If I'm teaching relaxation skills, again, they can use those different factors, if they're stressed, if they're under pressure. So everything that I do is transferable, and I think that has a number of benefits for the students, for the parents and teachers. Now I was thinking in terms of, what do you guys have to face, and what are the biggest challenges for you? Now, as a teacher, working with students, there are so many different transitions that we all go through, but students will be going through, and I think it's really important to understand that in in terms of all these factors. The social transition in terms of when they arrive at school, when they grow up, when they become adolescents, what happens, the emotional transitions, the cognitive, all these things are important to understand because as they grow up, they change. And realistically, I'd love to go into more depth about this, but it is very, very in-depth psychology, and it's something which, I feel a whole workshop could be dedicated to these things. But I feel as teachers, it is very important that you understand. So if you're working with a 15-year-old, do you understand how he's transitioning from academia, what's going on if he's studying GCSEs, but then also his emotional transitions and his thought patterns, how that changes. So there is a lot of research out there in general psychology, which again I really enjoy learning about, and I feel it is very important. So I understand, the amount of things and different things that you're having to handle. I think when you look at this, it really makes you think, wow, there is a lot more to a student than just sort of results and exams and sport. And it is about saying, well, how can I get the best out there by looking at all those different things. In terms of the sport transition and academic transition, sports, it could be going from grassroots to county to national to international. Again, it's understanding those different pressures. If that's happening with a student, what is going to happen, how are they going to change, how are they going to think differently. And for me, I will understand that as well. When I go into different schools, when I go into different schools, I often speak to the directors or the teachers about philosophy, about the culture that you have. Now, a lot of the schools and the private schools that I work in, I don't think they have a strong philosophy. I don't believe they have this culture which they're trying to focus on. They're trying to actually get the students to believe in, and then get the parents to also apply, and then also the other teachers. Often I'll go to schools where the PE staff are conflicting with other staff in terms of students playing sport, and when should they be let out of lessons, and if they've got too much work, should they be doing the work, or should they be doing the sport? And I think that comes down to your philosophy. That comes down to what is your philosophy as a school, what is your philosophy as a PE department, how do you develop that, and what are your beliefs, what are your values. And as I've mentioned, I don't believe many schools have this really embedded, and I think it's a matter of thinking about it, after this, and saying, well, what is our philosophy, how do we embed it, how do we get all the parents on board, how do we get all the staff on board. I look at physical education, there's so many benefits of it. In private schools, there's a private school I work with in North London. It is culturally predominantly Asian, and they have quite a challenge there in terms of getting the kids to play sports. A lot of the parents are often saying, well, we just want them to study academics and not worry about sport. There is a huge benefit to playing sport and exercising in terms of on your mental health, but there is also research which says sport can actually improve exam performance, academic performance, and that is all out there, it's all documented. It can improve concentration, attention, relieve stress, decrease depression, decrease anxiety. So there are so many benefits. And for me, I'm working at school to try and develop a philosophy to try and get kids just to exercise more. So sometimes it's not even about elite sport, it's just about getting children to be active. So how do you go about developing a philosophy? There's a number of questions that you have to ask yourself, and I think this is exactly the same as if you're just a teacher. I do this as a practitioner. I have to ask myself, what is my philosophy? It's very important. What are my values? When I work with athletes, and I can work with athletes who are very, very arrogant and love themselves, I find that a challenge because my personal philosophy and belief is I like people to be, honest and sort of calm and relaxed. But I also understand I'm not going to work with people like that, and I find that interesting in terms of teachers, that must be a challenge, that you all want students to be a certain way, but at times they're not going to act that way. So how does that change, and how does that change your thinking, and how does that change in terms of emotions? And I think that is a very, very hard thing to actually manage. But I think it's important to look at these questions and to think about them and say, what are my beliefs, what are my values? What motivates me? Why am I there? In terms of developing that philosophy, there are steps that you can take. There is a lot of research out there in terms of what you do and how you actually develop it. And there's a lot of different ways. I looked at a huge amount of research and trying to understand. I don't think there's a set way, but I think it is about sitting down as a department or staff and saying, well, what is our philosophy? What are our beliefs? What are our values? What do we want the students to be like? But then also taking into account the students themselves, because a lot of the time, we will just say, okay, we want it to be this way, but how many schools actually get the students in and say, well, what do you want the philosophy to look like? How many schools get the parents in and say, well, what do you want that to look like? And you can look at all the different things from the physical, the social, the technical, the tactical, the psychological aspects. You then have the goals. What goals do you want to achieve? Do you want to achieve certain goals within 3 months, 6 months? Do you use SMART goals? What goals do the students want to achieve? All important questions that you need to ask yourself when working with students, but also just for yourself. I often find teachers who struggle to stay motivated throughout the season, might be working with a team who aren't good enough. I think, well, that we keep losing every week. I coach football. I worked with a team last year. We conceded 130 goals in a season. We only played 12 games. Goals. So I understand. I've coached football. That is tough, but it is always thinking about, again, that comes down to your philosophy. What are you there for? Are you there to develop players? Does it change when different things happen? So mine was all about growth. Mine was all about what they can learn from that, because they were a very young team. The final point you have is you've got to apply, you've got to test it, you've got to adapt it. You've got to see whether the students enjoy it, how can you actually embed them. And it is a matter of keep learning within that process, to keep changing things. I know schools who will get people in to deliver workshops or get teachers to go and train in a certain psychological area, and they don't update that. It's been done for the last 15, 20 years, and often you speak to the students and they find it very boring. So it is a matter of constantly changing and understanding that. And that relates closely to an idea within business. So I work with a lot of companies within startups in London, and as I built my website, I've learned a lot of things, and this is called the Lean Startup methodology. Often people make the biggest mistake, and I was speaking to schools about this, in terms of they'll spend months, if not years, trying to develop a philosophy, and then they'll just put it out there. And what they don't do is they don't get any feedback from the students. They don't find a way to actually measure that philosophy to see, was it good, was it not good, what can we improve on? And this method basically says if you have an idea, you go away and build it, go away and develop it, but find a way to actually measure things. So you have the coding process, which is find a way to measure things in terms of does it work, does it not work, what do people like, getting feedback, getting questionnaires. You then get data, so you have a huge amount of data, and then you learn from that data and then you go again. I think it's a great idea, I think it's a great methodology in terms of doing things. I've spent hours and hours trying to develop this perfect product or perfect idea, and I'm sure you all do that as teachers in terms of what we want to have these massive ideas. It could take weeks, it could take months, but it is a matter of taking into account all these things in terms of how am I actually going to measure something and how am I actually going to get feedback from the people that I'm working with. And feedback is a very, very important process. So within the philosophy, I think it's important that if you do develop it and think, well, what do my students want? If I'm working with a team, what are their goals? What are their motivations? Why are they there? And it is about understanding all those different things. Are there any questions so far?
Yeah, there's a possible conflict. You're talking about the culture of the school versus the values of the coach.
Yeah.
How do you think that's best addressed? Is it best to create a uniform culture or a diverse culture?
When I was I think, and I'm only giving this up, when I was at Wellington yesterday, I know the PE department had, the director had a very different, not different, but he had his own sort of set of values. But it did relate closely to what the school's values were. So I think it is working with the school. I don't know in terms of general school, but I'm sure it does have a philosophy here in terms of what they want to do and how they want to produce students. But it is tough, because at the end of the day, in sport I understand that we all want to win and we want to be competitive. But in school sport, I think it's going away from that, seeing how can we develop better people as well as athletes. I think it is working closely with the school philosophy. I think that's better rather than developing a separate philosophy. But you could call things different words, name it in a different way, so that it maybe either excites or so you can create students who actually enjoy it and understand it.
Do you think there are dangers in uniformity?
Do I think there are dangers? Yes, there can be. in some ways. I think you've got to be cautious, and I think it is about understanding again what you're trying to get out of that. It would be interesting to see what the actual philosophy of the school is in general. And do you have a philosophy in terms of P department?
Yeah, it's written down. It's something we discuss all the time and try and get across to everybody as often as we can. Have we done anything overtly in terms of delivering to all the staff? No.
And I think that's the interesting thing, you as a department, you're trying to get something across, but then sometimes the staff might not do that or believe in that. It is getting everyone on board, and that's a very, very tough thing. And it is why, with some schools, we're looking at all the different types of people that we will involve, and it can be quite challenging when the head master or mistress does not agree, because they have the final say. I hope that's a answer to your question. Yes?
I think our sporting philosophy would very much tie in with our school philosophy. Actually, I don't think there'd be any conflict. Well, there wouldn't be any conflict. So.
Brilliant.
When you've seen student feedback done well, how does that happen? Like, what mechanisms do people have for getting feedback effectively from students?
You've got questionnaires. A lot of people, in terms of psychology, the hardest thing for me is measuring something. I can give a questionnaire on confidence, and tomorrow will be completely different. That's the hardest thing. And I'm reading a paper yesterday which was saying people should go away from doing that. You should be able to sort of monitor differences in terms of observations, how people act, how they behave, look at those different things. So there are observational measures. I, as a sports psychologist, will go watch a lot of games and do that. In one school I'm working within, we're looking at conformity, so I'm going to be spending a whole week at the school looking at how students conform in terms of classrooms. So the teachers there know that there are certain popular kids who can influence other kids, so we're going to look at can those kids influence and maybe the kids are quieter in a more positive way, and how do we do that, which is really interesting, not an easy thing to do. But it would be sitting down, it could be literally sitting down with a group of people and just getting the feedback, thoughts, and writing down, recording it, understanding it.
So have you seen that done, like student focus groups and that sort of thing?
I haven't seen that done. I'm mostly, from the schools that I go into, and again, each one is very different. But yeah, I don't see that in terms of philosophy. I would love to see someone that actually does take into account what students want. I think sometimes we forget that. At the end of the day, they what they want, and it's the same with when you're coaching. How many of us have asked, well, why are you motivated to play sport? What are your goals for the season? We sometimes forget that and care what our goal is to get you guys to win. There's a lot more to it. So it is tough, and that is a hard thing. But I think with philosophy, it would be focus groups. It would be getting them in. It could be individual interviews. It could be getting the captains or the leaders sitting down with all of them. What do they want? So there are many different ways.
Yeah, we do have a sort of boys, if you like, games or sport committee, and we do try and get their feedback. And it's the odd, you get the odd nugget now and again, but the reality is they won't think about that too much for themselves.
No.
Maybe that's part of the culture. That's not right, maybe, but yeah, I think we are aware of that and do act on what they say.
It's hard because when I've done stuff in groups when you're sitting with students and they're all very worried what to say because they're not sure of something to say.
Yeah, I know this one, so I was interested, because I know you can do like online forums or types of questionnaire and those sort of things.
Yeah.
Just your views of what works.
A lot of positive stuff I've seen is just off the cuff stuff at the end of sessions, at the end of, so particularly with the under-16s, when I've been across there, and it's just a case at the end of sessions, so there might be senior boys come in and just discuss the session, where they're at, where they feel they're headed, where they want to go, reflection of the game so far, and that's often, it's an relaxed environment. They're not feeling like they're assessing anything. It's just a discussion. I think that's, from what I've seen, I think that's probably quite valuable in terms of shape, direction of coaching.
And the word you use, reflection, is massive. So there is a huge amount of research in terms of how you reflect properly. I have to reflect as a practitioner. It relates closer to debriefing. There are steps in terms of how to debrief a team, when and what to say. And the reflection process that I'm allowed to say, there is a process in terms of what you do, after what questions to ask, how to actually get students to engage within it. And it's important for students to reflect on what went well, what didn't, what did I learn from this, how can I improve. And I think often when I work with students, we try to develop students who are analytical and who do things In terms of my model that I use when working with sort of athletes, I take into account all these different factors. So I say within sort of the core within a student, you've got their psychological characteristics, you have their makeup, their personality. I then focus on well-being, mental health. So I look at things in terms, are they managing pressure? Are they coping with different factors? Are they able to cope with sport and academia? I then look at the wider environment in terms of coaches, friends, family. How do you influence that? What role do we play? And I think that's very important because as much as you could be doing things in terms of philosophy, the child could be going down and the parent could be saying the complete opposite. Often I've done workshops where I have students sitting in the room with their parents and say to students, how you don't like your parents watching you, and quite a lot will put their hands up and the parents will be very shocked. I had a story a few days ago of a parent at a private school who paid for his son, he paid a performance analysis company just to record his son. It's absolutely crazy. I can speak to parents and they'll say things to me, and you speak to their son or daughter and they'll say completely differently. He's fascinating, he's very interesting, and I think it is, after a game, a parent can speak to their son or daughter and they want to know everything about the game or what they did well, what they didn't. They know what they did well, they know what they didn't. Sometimes they don't need that from parents. So it is trying to get everyone on board. And then the final point is the wider environment in terms of different factors, money. Finance is a huge part within sport, and I've learned that. And I've learned that elite sport is actually a really tough environment. And I know sports psychologists will use the word brutal, and I think brutal is a very strong word. It is. You need to have a certain personality to actually thrive and survive within that environment. In terms of well-being, for me, well-being is a huge part of just teaching, really. It's about understanding all these different factors and saying, are they exercising, do they have good relationships with people, are they able to manage different factors, look at the wider environment. It relates very closely to my core model. I like well-being, and there's different ways of how we can improve these areas. But like I said, the school where students aren't exercising enough, we're trying to look at all these factors and say, how can we influence them? So we look at the parents, we're looking at the relationships between the teams, we're saying, can the older people influence, the older students influence the younger students? We then have physical, the type of exercising they're doing, how often, and then psychological, which is behaviour change. So in terms of exercise, getting people to actually start, there's a huge amount of research in terms of trying to shift behaviour. It's not easy, but that plays within that. And you've got economic, which is finance within the school. My approach, so I'm very much focused on cognitive behavioural therapy. There are a number of different therapies within psychology. Sports psychologists, some sports psychologists will use psychodynamic, which is very Freudian. Some people will use cognitive, social, behavioural. There are so many different ones. But for me, CBT has been most effective in treating people with mental health problems. And it also, for me, I understand, and I think it's quite powerful in terms of that it simply says that what we think and our thoughts influence our emotions, they influence how we feel, and therefore they influence how we act. It does have physiological changes within that, but the simple way to look at it is that you could have a student who is preparing for an exam. The morning before he wakes up, he's saying to himself in his mind, I'm very nervous, I failed the last exam, what if I fail this exam? If I fail this exam, I'm not going to do well. If I don't do well, I'm not going to go to university. If I don't go to university, I'm not going to make any money. That's called catastrophizing. It happens. People do it. That is closely related to things such as anxiety and depression. Emotionally, they're going to feel anxious, they're going to feel sad. Physiologically, they're going to have an increase in heart rate. And often people start to get worried when they experience those physiological changes. So it's about understanding that. Then behaviourally, they'll start to close up. They're not going to be positive in terms of their body language. They often won't be interacting with other people, it could be quiet. You shift that to someone who's got their thoughts of, I'm going to do well in this exam, I'm positive, I've worked really hard. Completely different emotions, completely different behaviours. So for me, our thoughts influence everything that we do. And from the moment we wake up till we go to bed. And it is about trying to get teachers and students to understand thought processes. I will often find it hard for students to open up about what they are thinking and what's going on in their mind. I think it is about trying to actually develop that is a very, very hard thing, because often students will tell you how they're feeling rather than what actually they are saying to themselves within their head. So all the things I do relate very closely to mental health and sport, and the interesting part within it is that exercise and sport, yes, can reduce depression and anxiety and relieve stress, but it can actually also cause all those things as well to an elite level. There is a lot more research now. We're looking at burnout, retirement. I like to hope that all of you know Denise Lewis, because the young students don't know Denise Lewis, which makes me sad. I interviewed her, and she spoke about how hard it was to retire. She didn't know how to have a family, she didn't know how to have a life. Athletic identity is massive. And I often teach students that as much as some athletes might be earning hundreds of thousands of pounds, they will still be experiencing the same troubles and same problems that we experience. And you could have a football player who's been on X amount, he retires, he will have no idea how to shop, he will have no idea how to live his life, and that can be a challenge. I think the stigma is reducing, but I think we've got a very long way to go. And for me, like I said, this is my passion, this is why I'm studying CBT, because as a sports psychologist, I actually can't treat real mental health problems. If I do CBT, I will be qualified to do that, so it's something else. It's planning another goes my stream. But like I said, it is interesting, and I'm starting to realise that sport is tough. And unless you really are a top athlete, it's not fun. When I have a child, would I recommend them going to elite sport? Most probably not, unless they are absolutely incredible, because it is very, very, very hard. I work with 2 Olympic athletes, and the struggles that they deal with weekly is not fun in terms of managing those different factors. So it's understanding that in terms of students, if we do have a student who is playing to a high level, how are we managing schoolwork, but also how are we managing sport. My approach in terms of when I work with people, and this is just my general approach in terms of psychology and well-being and mental health, I see it as though we all start at this baseline. Often when we all experience problems, we'll drop to the danger line where we have anxiety, fear, worries, nerves, and that's when sort of performance is going downwards. And often what we do in this country and in general, we'll get short-term help, and we'll go see someone, we'll offer support, and that could be 6 to 8 weeks, and we'll go back up to the baseline. And what will happen is, just because we've had that short-term help, and then we'll keep fluctuating between the baseline and the danger line. And my approach is, can we look at long-term help in terms of developing students and developing athletes? Can we give them support, when they start the academies to when they end the academies, so that we can get them to that peak performance line? So instead of dropping from the baseline to danger, it could be the peak performance line, and if they experience a wobble, they'll just drop down to the baseline where they can still manage things quite well. So it is about saying, how can we sort of take it to that next level? And for me, it is looking at long-term development, is looking at long-term support. Yes?
So I should ask a question. I can't remember his name, but there was a rugby player who's been on Twitter saying how depressed, verging on suicidal he's been. And they were talking, Mark Bayfield was talking about some Rugby Tonight programme. Do you think the kids are aware of, through social media, these players, these people who are suffering mentally in terms of their health? How aware do you think they are? And my other question is, if you think they are, do you think as a school, perhaps at sort of sixth form level, they ought to have some sort of teaching or support or something in terms of thinking about those issues if they're going on to do,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think academies really, I'm just being honest, I don't think they really care about mental health that much. Just my personal, I was saying earlier to a few people, they only really care about those 3 or 4 athletes who are going to make it. If you were to actually get them to be really honest, that's just true, that's just sport, it's the elite end, they only care about results. I very rarely meet academy directors who will say, well, we want to develop a person. Which is strange, but within schools, I don't know, do you have a wellbeing programme here?
We've got a citizenship sort of programme. I was just wondering from the schools you've been in, whether that's, that sort of education and that kind of support is offered, from Wellington College or wherever you've been.
Yeah.
Is that sort of thing generally?
Wellington have a huge wellbeing programme, which is the only school I've ever seen. I was at the Perth School personally very positive around mental health. I understand it. I've got to be doing more stuff. But I personally don't think schools are doing enough stuff. I think there should be, every school should have someone who's developing well-being. I understand most private schools have counsellors, but they're reactive rather than proactive. So what they're doing is, I've got a child who's depressed, they send him to a counsellor and that's it. What schools aren't doing is you're not actually preventing mental health. You're not actually doing workshops around how to manage stress, how to manage anxiety. And for me, just because I'm so passionate about it, it frustrates me because we should be doing more in general to reduce mental health. Within sport, you've got the stigma within male-dominated sports. We're not going to speak out, we've got to be a strong individual. Rugby, you do now have a company called State of Mind, who are mental health, who are increasing and growing, which is great, and we're doing more things.
Yeah, can I just say, I've worked with the Academy for quite a number of years now, and they have zero interest in this side of kids' well-being and their health. No interest at all whatsoever. And in fact, I've suggested to them several times to get the sports slightly involved, and they're not interested.
It's sad, it makes me sad, because I think there are a lot of people struggling. And, the stats are 1 in 4 people experience mental health problems. So, it's common, and the peak developmental age for mental health problems occurs 16 to 24. And you look at the transitions that a student who's playing elite sport will be going through in that age. They could be going to university, so then they're leaving home, then they've got to look after themselves. And if they're playing sport to a high level, they've got to travel to wherever they're going. So I don't think they're aware of it. Often you'll speak to students about mental health and they make funny jokes and talk to each other and they'll start doing things. I've seen students cutting their arms and things like that. And you're sitting there, and but that's just what it's like, because it hasn't been taught, and they don't understand it. And often people, I'm starting to work in an inpatient home, people think there will be people running around in straitjackets, one flew over the cuckoo nest and smacking their heads against the wall. It's not like that. So I do feel a lot more needs to be done in schools. And in sport, the problem, like I said, you have sports psychologists, but most of my friends with sports psychologists, they simply aren't qualified to treat mental health, which is why I'm going to the next level, because I feel it is a big part of it. I don't know whether it will change, because I just feel that elite sport is results-driven, and unless you have a very positive director of sport who is going to embed it, because I've been to places where there's a coach who will say, I've really enjoyed and understand it, but then the director will say, well, no, it's a load of rubbish, in which case I have absolutely no chance of doing it.
Do you think this is a long-term cultural change issue as you come through? Because, clearly, in my mind, clearly there's a link. If the mental health is sound, then the performance is better.
Yeah.
They're flowing and they're comfortable.
Yeah, it'll take a long time, but I think schools is is why I'm doing what I'm doing with the schools. I think it's the place to start. I think, we can say, well, what program we can develop, how we can get all the students to understand. But it is also understanding the teachers' mental health as well. Because, my girlfriend is a teacher, star teacher, and I've realised what a stressful job it actually is. And I've spoken to her colleagues, it's not easy. So you manage and have to deal with a lot of pressure and stress. So it is also about caring about everyone in this room and what you do in your own mental health. But I look at Wellington. Wellington are doing it fantastically, and hopefully I'm going to speak to the person who runs wellbeing. But I don't see why schools, I don't actually understand why schools don't have a wellbeing director or someone who is delivering workshops. And I will get a response, we don't have enough time. They're telling me you don't have enough time for someone's mental health. It's not right, in my opinion. It is. I get angry about it, but that's just because I'm so passionate. I don't want to see students struggle. Because I've seen people struggle with mental health problems, and it's tough. And I'm sure we all know people who've experienced it, and it's, they're not crazy. They're just normal people who maybe experienced some depression or stress or haven't handled it very well. And I spoke to a clinical psychologist who said maybe it's not 1 in 4 people, maybe it's 4 in 4 people experiencing mental health problems, but out of those 4, only 1 doesn't have the right coping skills to deal with it very well. So I agree. I think that's right. So yeah, for me, it is saying, can we do as a school or culture, whatever, to try and improve it. And in sport, as you said, it's very, very hard because not many directors really care about it, which is sad. So moving on, the important thing that I often get asked, by teachers, and the question that we all want to know is, why is it that we have some performers who are incredible at what they do, aren't able to handle pressure, whereas others are. You look at the football player Torres for Liverpool and Chelsea. incredible football player, all of a sudden went to Chelsea and then everything went completely wrong. You can't lose technical ability overnight and over the space of a few months. I don't believe you can. I think, it is more psychological and it's understanding those different factors. How long do I have? Is it 5 minutes? Okay, right, so I'm going to miss out growth mindset because I'm sick of the growth mindset. So it is about looking at things like this. So I know of research that looks at resilience. Resilience is massive, and I like resilience because it sort of says, if you look on a graph, we can keep going up, we might experience a dip, and then we get higher and higher and higher. And it is about saying, how can we look at all these different factors and take them into account. And a big part of it is challenge appraisal and metacognitions. Metacognitions are thinking about thinking. So how do we develop that? And that comes down to, I'll skip this, a principle in terms of understanding our thoughts. So in terms of research, apparently we experience 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day. That is a lot of thoughts. And often when something goes wrong, we believe the first thought that comes into our mind, so we catastrophize. And often when we worry, how often do our worries actually come true? Often it's quite rarely in terms of when you think about it. And it is about understanding this approach. Now there's a book called Learned Optimism, which I think is fantastic. It teaches you a lot about understanding how we think. And it teaches a lot about pessimistic thinking styles and optimistic thinking. The basics to understand this is called the ABC model. The A stands for adversity, the B stands for beliefs about that adversity, the C stands for consequence, which is our emotions. Now often what happens is when we experience something bad or something goes wrong, people, they've lost a match and then automatically think that they feel sad or really annoyed or really angry. But we don't just automatically feel angry. There is a reason we feel angry, and that reason is simply because that person's beliefs. So when you think about this for me, I believe all students should be taught it because there's a lot more to it. But it's basically saying that if you look at this person, they're feeling sad, you compare them to the next person, it is completely different in terms of their thinking styles. So our thoughts are so powerful that they influence how we feel. They're going to influence how we think, they're going to influence in terms of how we perform. And it is about understanding that in different students. And I use this now, if I get an argument or something happens, I think, well, what am I thinking? Am I annoyed at that person? And why am I thinking that way? You'll often get students who the teacher will shout to them and then they'll think, they don't like me, they've never liked me. And it could be getting that student to think, well, maybe the teacher's had a bad day. And that changes the way that they feel instead of thinking, it's all my fault, to thinking, okay, that's a little bit better. It is challenging thinking styles. This is in-depth psychology that I believe needs to be taught across schools, and it's a very simple principle. It's not complicated. It is trying to simplify to students, which is the hardest thing. You can then work through things. There's questions that when people experience anxiety or pressure, what is the best that could happen? What is the most likely thing that could happen? What is the worst that could happen? So getting people to problem solve is okay. It's a big part of it in terms of what we're doing. I then work with students to say, what is one thing that you could do to increase the chance of the best thing that can happen? What is one thing that you could do to increase the chance of the most likely thing to happen? And what is one thing you could do to reduce the chance of the worst thing from happening? It is all about getting people to problem solve and think for themselves, and developing autonomy, and different factors like that. So for me, this model is very, very important. It is simple to understand. Often students get quite confused with it, but it is simply saying that we don't just automatically feel a certain way when something goes wrong or something happens. It is because we're thinking about something, we're saying something in our mind, whether that's, I can't do this exam, it's not good enough, all those different negative thoughts. If they're changed to positive, you're going to have a very different emotional response. I've got 2 minutes, so I don't have enough. I was going to talk a bit about, there's something called the Compass model. I would suggest people either Google this. It's all about developing a better relationship with athletes. It's a really good model in terms of how you can go about it, what you can improve. And it's really interesting. I know the researchers have come up with this in terms of, do we have effective relationships with athletes? How do we actually work on it? And how do we improve that? So it's looking at all these different factors. There is a lot more to it than just getting to know your athlete and understanding a few aspects. It is developing a good relationship and So, thank you all for listening. I just wanted to give you a brief sort of introduction in terms of what I do within schools. My website I have is believeperform.com. It has over 600 articles, it has podcasts, video interviews. My Twitter, I post loads of infographics relating to students, anything, time management, developing creative students, and hopefully by the end of next week, I hope it's going to grow even bigger. I have some positive stuff coming into it. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. I apologise for rushing. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome. Yes.
You said you had a sort of model to feedback to boys.
Yeah.
And then you were going to say.
Oh, debrief. Yeah, I've got.
Could you send that to Pete?
Yeah, I've got a document on debrief and reflection.
Yeah, that'd be good. I find that my boys just take it as music. Salt. Actually, maybe that's hard to do.
Okay, fine. Okay, yeah, I've got ones in terms of questions you can ask and things like that. So, okay.
Just quickly, where do you stand on like psychological profiling at the start of a season? So they do quite a big questionnaire, you get them in to do that, and then you find out what their preferential learning styles and things like that, right?
I don't know. I know big companies that do that.
Yeah.
Who, again, no qualifications, just feel like we're going to do it. Sport loves that. You know, if I was to develop something, I would develop a profile because I know that's what the market wants. But I don't agree with it in the sense that I can measure all those things. It's just going to give me it's just going to give me results that mean nothing. Clubs just love it because I know a Premier League football academy that has a company that does that, and they've done absolutely nothing. All they've got is a set of results to say, okay, I've got this, then they'll remeasure it in 6 months, and if they get improvements, great. If they don't, tough luck. I think there are some really good profiles, but I find them hard. I can always argue against them in some ways. I just think sport wants that. Elite sport just seems to want quick results. Sport psychology is not quick results, not fixed. It's to manage. How do I manage things more effectively? But yeah, I think clubs can do a lot more. I don't know many who do profile, but it's the same with business. In business, these huge companies are now doing business profiling, and I just think it's a load of rubbish. It's just my personal opinion in terms of, I think you could learn a lot more about people and giving them a questionnaire that's going to produce results.
Would it not help inform the feedback, so you could give them more positive and encouraging feedback, where another athlete might respond better to being a bit more critical and a bit more kind of stick theory as opposed to carrot theory?
I think there's better ways of doing it. I think just the companies I know who do it. I think there are ways. I think it's very challenging to measure stuff.
Yeah.
It is so hard, especially in psychology, to measure confidence, anxiety, around leadership, all those factors. Sometimes it's better to observe and get to know people.
Yeah.
I prefer speaking to an athlete than measuring something. But there are some people doing some really good work, and I know they're trying to develop it. I think the EIS, English Institute of Sport, doing a lot more with that. But I'd love to. You just need a lot of money and a lot of time.
I think I started to really education and try and measure all kids by numbers now. Actually, talking to them and get to know them. It's an easy route.
Yeah, it is.
It's easy at the top end to just go pick out people who are up, people who are down.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more to results and developing. And Wellington, I think they said they try not to sort of put that pressure on results, and I think it's quite in terms of academics, and I think that's quite a positive thing. So it is understanding that. But again, every school has different students, and like I said here, you've got when I deliver the Welsh, you've got really engaging students, which is positive. In other schools, I can have the worst time of my life. And I thought private schools were quite nice and lovely kids, but I think it depends on the philosophy and the culture of the school. And I will just get some teachers who just don't care. I think it's sad. And what can you do? You've got to have passion and design.